I never thought I'd sign up for a week-long retreat in the desert, let alone one where the yoga teacher tells you that touch is the real medicine. Honestly, I was just desperate to get away from the noise, the endless Zoom calls, and the feeling that I was stuck in a loop. I figured a little silence and sun wouldn't hurt. But what I didn't expect was how fast everything would shift, starting with a guy who showed up like he belonged to the desert itself. So there I was, driving my rental along this dusty, winding road that cut through miles of barren land, the kind of place where the horizon looks like it's burning, and the only shade is what you make for yourself. The retreat center was just a cluster of low, adobe buildings with scrubby bushes and red dirt everywhere. It wasn't fancy, no spa or pool, but it promised something I guess I was craving: space to breathe and heal. I checked in under my own name, feeling a bit out of place among the crowd of yoga mats and meditation cushions stacked by the entrance. This wasn't my usual scene. I'm more of a grab a beer and watch the game kind of guy, but I was determined to make the most of it. The staff gave me a brief orientation, then pointed me toward the main hall where the first session was about to start. That's when I saw him. He was already there, sitting cross-legged on a mat near the front, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. His hair was sun-bleached straw, messy but somehow effortless, and there was this calm confidence about him that made the room feel quieter. When he opened his eyes and smiled at the group, it wasn't just polite. It was like he was inviting everyone into a secret. His name was Eli, the yoga teacher whose reputation apparently went beyond just poses and stretches. He talked about connection, vulnerability, and yes, touch. I remember thinking, this guy is going to be the weirdest part of this whole trip, but also, maybe he's exactly what I didn't know I needed. The first class was gentle. Eli's voice was warm, guiding us through movements that felt foreign and familiar all at once. But then he said something that caught me off guard. Touch is healing, he said, looking right at me, or at least that's how it felt. Not just physically, but the way we let someone in through presence and care. It was a simple sentence, but it landed like a punch and a balm at the same time. I'd spent years building walls, convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that vulnerability was a weakness. Now, in this quiet desert room, with the sun dipping low outside, I was suddenly wondering what it would be like to let that guard down. After class, Eli stuck around, casually chatting with a few folks. When he came over to me, I could feel this energy shift, a spark of something that didn't fit the usual small talk. "You're new," he said, eyes curious but kind. "What brought you here?" I shrugged, trying to sound casual. Needed to get out of my head, I guess. He nodded like he understood more than I was saying. Sometimes, the desert teaches us to listen to what we're really feeling. No distractions, just the raw stuff. I smiled, half nervous, half intrigued. "Sounds like a tough teacher." "Only if you're not ready," he said softly. Then his hand brushed mine as he handed me a glass of water. It was brief, but electric in a way I hadn't expected. That was the moment I realized this retreat wasn't going to be just about yoga or meditation. It was going to be about something deeper, something that scared me and excited me all at once, and I had no idea where it would lead. That brief touch, his fingers grazing mine for just a second, kept replaying in my head as I settled into the retreat's rhythm. The desert seemed to stretch on forever, a mix of harsh light during the day, and these incredible, quiet nights where the stars felt like they were close enough to touch. But inside, I was feeling something I wasn't used to, a pull, a question I couldn't shake about Eli and this whole idea of touch being healing. The next morning, we started with another class, but this time Eli introduced partner exercises, which immediately made me tense up. Partner work in yoga? That sounded like a fast track to awkwardness, especially for someone like me who's not exactly comfortable with people getting close. When he paired me with a guy named Mark, I felt relieved. Mark was chatty, easygoing, and didn't make me feel like I had to be anything other than awkward me. Still, I kept stealing glances at Eli. He moved through the room with a kind of grace, adjusting postures, offering quiet encouragement. There was an ease to him that made it obvious he'd been teaching this way for years, but there was also something personal underneath it all, as if what he was sharing wasn't just technique, but life lessons. Later that day, during a break, I found myself near the small communal kitchen where people were making tea and snacking on fruit. Eli was there too, leaning against the counter, casually chatting with a few participants. When he caught my eye, he gestured me over with a subtle nod. "Hey, want to get some fresh air?" he asked, voice low and easy. Before I could overthink it, I was saying yes. We stepped outside into the warm afternoon sun, the desert heat wrapping around us like a thick blanket. The retreat was quiet, except for the occasional birds and the distant hum of a car on the nearby road. We found a small shaded spot near some scrubby bushes, and for a minute, neither of us said anything. Finally, Eli broke the silence. "You ever been to a place like this before?" "Not really," I admitted. "I mean, I've been on vacations, but this is different. It's quieter. Somehow louder, too, if that makes sense." He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes. "Yeah, the desert has a way of making you hear the things you usually ignore. The stuff buried under the distractions." I nodded, feeling that familiar lump in my throat. "I guess I'm here because I've been ignoring a lot." He looked at me, really looked. "What do you think you're ignoring?" I shrugged, trying to keep my voice casual but failing. "Maybe that I'm lonely, that I've been pretending I'm fine on my own when I'm not, that I'm scared of letting people in." Eli's expression softened. "That's brave to admit." We sat there for a few minutes, the silence this time feeling less heavy, more like a space where something could grow. Then, out of nowhere, he reached over and touched my arm. Not in a dramatic way, just a gentle press, like to say, "I'm here." I swallowed hard, that same electric feeling from the day before rushing back, but this time stronger. "Touch can mean a lot of things," he said quietly. "It can be scary, or it can be healing, but it has to be safe." I looked at him, searching his eyes. They were open, honest. "No games." "Safe sounds good," I said before I could talk myself out of it. Over the next couple of days, the retreat settled into this odd, beautiful routine. Morning yoga with Eli, guiding us through the poses, afternoons spent hiking the dusty trails or journaling in the shade, evenings around a fire pit where stories and laughter floated up with the smoke. Eli and I found ourselves crossing paths more and more. Sometimes it was during class, sometimes while grabbing water or waiting for the evening meal. Each time, there was this quiet charge in the air between us, like words were there but unspoken. One night, after the fire had died down and most of the group had retreated to their rooms, I found Eli sitting alone on the patio, looking up at the stars. I joined him without thinking, sitting down beside him on the rough wooden bench. "Beautiful night," I said, voice low. He nodded. "Makes you feel small and infinite at the same time." We sat in silence for a while, the desert night wrapping around us like a secret. Then he turned to me and said, "How are you feeling?" "Really?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say, "better," and move on. But there was something about his gaze that made me want to be honest. "I'm scared," I confessed. "Scared of what this feeling is. Scared of wanting something I'm not sure I'm allowed to want." Eli shifted closer, the space between us shrinking. "What are you afraid of?" "That I'll get hurt. That I'm messing this up already." He smiled gently, like he understood the weight I was carrying. "No one's perfect at this. We're all just figuring it out as we go." His hand found mine again, fingers warm and steady. That simple touch spoke louder than any words. For the first time in a long time, I let myself lean into it. And just like that, the retreat stopped being about escaping and started being about finding something I didn't even know I was looking for. That night marked a turning point, even if I didn't fully realize it in the moment. Sitting there with Eli, hand in hand under the desert stars, felt like stepping off a cliff into something unknown, but not in a way that made me panic. More like a quiet surrender. I wasn't used to surrendering, especially not to someone else. But there I was. The next morning, I woke up with this strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. I'd spent so long convincing myself I didn't need anyone, that I was fine on my own, that the idea of opening up like this felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I wasn't sure if Eli felt the same way, but I kept thinking about the way his fingers had held mine, steady and warm. At breakfast, he was already there, chatting with a couple of other participants, but when our eyes met, there was a quick, shared glance, a silent acknowledgement of the night before. No words, just a smile. The morning yoga session was tougher than usual. Eli guided us through poses that required balance and trust, like partner stretches where you relied on someone else's weight and presence. When it was my turn to pair up, I found myself hoping for Eli, but he paired me with someone else, Matt, a guy who'd been joking nonstop since day one. It was fine, but I couldn't shake this feeling that the real work was happening between me and Eli, not out here on the mat. After class, I lingered, watching Eli as he moved through the group, offering advice, adjusting postures with gentle hands. There was something magnetic about the way he moved. Like he wasn't just a teacher, but a healer in the truest sense. Later, during a break, I caught him alone by the edge of the retreat grounds, near a cluster of yucca plants. I walked over, heart pounding more than I expected. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," he replied, turning to face me with that same calm energy that felt like a lifeline. I hesitated, then blurted out, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. What made you say that touch is healing? Like, really?" Eli smiled, as if I'd asked the simplest yet most profound question. "Because it is. We're wired to connect, to feel safe through touch. It's how we heal, how we grow, but it has to come from a place of trust." I nodded slowly. "Trust, that's the part one struggle with." He stepped a little closer, eyes steady. "Me too, every day." For a moment, the desert wind stirred around us, and the sun dipped just enough to cast long shadows on the red dirt. I swallowed and decided to take a chance. "Would it be okay if I tried? Like, with you?" Eli's smile softened. "I've been hoping you would." That was the first time we really touched beyond the yoga mat. A slow, careful brush of fingers, then a hand resting lightly on my forearm. My skin tingled, and I felt this warmth spread from my chest out into my limbs. Over the next couple of days, our connection grew, but it wasn't rush or fireworks. It was quiet moments, shared smiles during class, lingering eye contact over meals, the way he'd brush his hand along mine when he thought I wasn't looking. It felt like learning a language I'd forgotten I spoke. One afternoon, Eli invited me on a hike to a nearby canyon, off the official retreat trails. None of the other participants came along, so it felt like a secret escape. The hike was harder than I expected. The heat, the uneven rocks. But Eli moved with this effortless grace, stopping occasionally to point out a strange plant or a bird's call. I was struggling to keep up, lungs burning, but I didn't want to admit it. Eventually, we reached a small overlook, a rocky ledge with a breathtaking view of the valley below. The air was still, save for a soft breeze that ruffled Eli's hair. We sat down side by side, and I realized how comfortable I felt just being there with him. No pressure, no pretending. "Thanks for bringing me here," I said quietly. Eli looked at me, eyes bright. "You're welcome. I wanted to show you something beautiful." I smiled, but then the mood shifted as a shadow crossed his face. "Can I be honest?" he asked. "Always." He sighed. "I don't usually do this kind of retreat. I'm more of a traveler, a wanderer. But this place, it's where I come to heal too. From some stuff I've been running from." I nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. I tell my students about touch being healing because it's something I had to relearn for myself. I was hurt, closed off, like you, but finding safe connection changed everything. His honesty hit me like a punch to the gut and a balm all at once. I reached out, fingers trembling, and took his hand in mine again. "I'm glad I met you, Eli." He squeezed my hand gently. "Me too." That moment, suspended above the canyon, felt like the beginning of something real, something worth fighting for. But as much as I wanted to cling to it, a small voice in my head reminded me this was fragile, that I'd spent so long hiding, and maybe I wasn't ready to fully let go yet. Still, for the first time in a long time, I was willing to try. To believe that maybe, just maybe, touch really could be healing. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between hope and fear. Every time Eli and I shared a quiet moment, the way his fingers would graze mine when he thought I wasn't looking, or the way our eyes would meet across the room, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I wanted desperately, but was terrified to fall into. One afternoon, after a particularly intense yoga session, Eli invited me to join him for tea outside, near the fire pit. It was quieter than usual. Most of the retreat participants were spread out, either hiking or resting, and the heat had mellowed into a soft, golden light. The desert was glowing in this way that felt almost unreal. We sat on the wooden bench together, the tea steaming gently between us. For a while, we just watched the sky slowly shift colors, the silence comfortable but charged. Finally, Eli spoke. "I want to ask you something, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable." I looked over at him, heart racing. "Go ahead." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Do you think you could let yourself be cared for, not just during the retreat, but beyond? When you go back home?" It was the hardest question anyone had asked me in a long time. Because the truth was, I wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone to see me, really see me. But there was a voice in my head, whispering all the reasons I shouldn't, all the ways it could go wrong. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm not good at that, at letting people in." He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, a gesture so tender it caught me off guard. No one's perfect at it, but we get better with practice. I swallowed, feeling the heat rise in my chest. "What if I'm scared I'll mess it up?" Eli smiled, a slow, genuine curve of his lips. "Then we mess up together." It was ridiculous how much that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. The night grew cooler, and we stayed there longer than I expected, talking about everything and nothing. The kind of conversation where you forget time is passing, where the world shrinks down to just the two of you. Over the next couple of days, our connection deepened. We shared long walks beneath the wide-open sky, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable, but full of promise. There was a moment during a sunset hike when Eli stopped, turning to face me with that steady gaze. "I know this is all new," he said softly, "and I want you to go at your own pace. No pressure." I nodded, grateful for his patience. "I want this too. I just don't want to screw it up." "You won't," he said, taking my hand in his again. "Not if we're honest." That honesty felt like a lifeline. I realized I was starting to trust him, not just with my time here, but with something deeper, something I'd shut down for so long. One evening, after a group meditation session, Eli invited me to join him for a walk under the stars. The night was cool, the sky a tapestry of glittering lights. We wandered through the quiet retreat grounds, and at one point, Eli stopped and pulled me close. Our bodies aligned, the space between us evaporating. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. My heart hammered in my chest, but I nodded before I could talk myself out of it. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, like learning a new language. Then deeper, warmer, like finding a home I hadn't known I was missing. When we pulled apart, Eli rested his forehead against mine. "You're safe with me." I wanted to believe that with everything I had. The walls I'd built around myself felt like they were crumbling, brick by brick. But even as the warmth spread through me, a flicker of doubt remained. Because this retreat was almost over, and soon I'd have to return to the world I'd left behind. A world where I wasn't sure there was room for this kind of openness, or for Eli. The next morning, I woke early, restless. I found Eli on the patio, sitting with a sketch pad in his lap, the morning sun casting long shadows. "Can I sit?" I asked. He looked up and smiled. "Always." We sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the desert wake up. Then I said, "What happens after this? After the retreat?" He paused, thoughtful. "We figure it out, together or apart, but I want you to know that this, us, it's real to me." That honesty hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to believe it, but fear still clung to the edges of my heart. "I don't want this to end," I confessed, "but I'm scared of losing it." Eli reached over, taking my hand once more. "Then don't lose it. Fight for it, but don't be afraid to lean on me." For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to trust again, to let someone in, to find healing in touch, not just on the mat, but in life. The desert had taught me that sometimes the hardest journeys lead to the most unexpected places, and with Eli by my side, I was ready to see where this path would take me. The last couple of days at the retreat felt like they were slipping through my fingers faster than I wanted them to. There was this bittersweet edge to everything. The sun still blazing hot during the day, the night still cool and star-flecked, but a weight of impending goodbye hanging over us like a thick desert haze. Eli and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, like two pieces of a puzzle that hadn't quite fit together before but finally found their groove. We'd share morning coffee on the patio, hands occasionally brushing, fingers entwining without a word. During yoga classes, we exchanged glances that spoke louder than anything Eli said during meditation. Our conversation stretched long into the evening, sometimes about the retreat, sometimes about life, and sometimes about dreams that felt too fragile to name out loud. But as much as I yearned to hold on to it, a gnawing anxiety kept creeping in. How do you carry something like this back to the real world? How do you explain to yourself, let alone someone else, that you found a connection in the middle of nowhere, in a place where the only witnesses were cacti and the endless sky? One afternoon, Eli suggested we take one more hike before I had to leave. I agreed without hesitation, though my stomach twisted with nerves and excitement. We set out mid-afternoon, the sun starting its slow descent behind the horizon, casting everything in a golden glow. The trail wound through rocky outcrops and patches of desert wildflowers, the dust dry and warm beneath our boots. At one point, Eli paused, turning to face me. His eyes shone in the fading light. "Do you want to see something special?" he asked. I nodded, heart pounding. He led me off the main trail, through a narrow opening between two large boulders. On the other side was a small hidden clearing, and in the center stood an ancient-looking tree, twisted and gnarled, but alive and strong despite the harsh surroundings. "It's called the Desert Heart," Eli said softly. "It's been here longer than anyone knows, surviving storms, droughts, heat. It's a reminder that even in the hardest places, life finds a way." I looked at the tree, marveling at its resilience. It felt like a metaphor for everything we'd been talking about: the pain, the healing, the courage it takes to keep growing when the world seems determined to dry you out. Eli stepped closer to me, his hand reaching for mine. "You're like this tree, you know, stronger than you think." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in myself. We sat down beneath the tree, the shade offering a brief respite from the heat. Eli leaned into me, his head resting lightly on my shoulder. The moment was quiet and full, the kind you want to freeze and carry with you forever. But then reality crashed back in. "I'm scared," I whispered after a while. "Scared that this is just a beautiful story that ends when I leave." Eli lifted my chin gently so I was looking at him. "It doesn't have to end. What we have here, what we're building, it's real. But it takes work. And it takes trust." I swallowed. "Trust is hard." "Yeah," he agreed, "but not impossible." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. We stayed there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the day give way to night. Back at the retreat house, the evening was filled with the usual group dinner and final reflections. Everyone was buzzing about the week, the breakthroughs, the challenges, but I found myself distracted, waiting for a moment alone with Eli. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the fire pit was just glowing embers, I found him on the patio again, sketching quietly. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Hey," I sat down beside him, the warmth from the fading fire wrapping around us. "I don't want to say goodbye," I admitted. "I don't either," Eli said honestly. "But this isn't goodbye. It's see you later." I smiled, though my chest felt tight. "Promise me we'll try, even if it's hard." He nodded, reaching out to hold my hand. "I promise." That night, as I lay in bed staring up at the plain white ceiling of my small retreat room, I realized that what I was feeling wasn't just fear. It was hope. Fragile. Maybe a little scary, but real. The next morning, packing my bags, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. I said my goodbyes, hugged a few new friends, and finally stood in front of Eli for one last moment. He pulled me into a hug, strong and sure. "Take this with you," he whispered into my ear. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of him, a mix of desert air and something distinctly Eli. And when I pulled back, he kissed me gently, like a promise sealed beneath the endless sky. Driving away from the retreat, the desert fading behind me, I felt lighter than I had in months. Maybe because I knew that healing wasn't about running away or plastering over cracks. It was about connection, about trust, about the courage to let someone in, even when it's scary. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to start something real. Back in my apartment, the city noise felt different, louder, busier, less forgiving after the quiet openness of the desert. I unpacked my bag slowly, Eli's presence still lingering in the small worn scarf I had tucked away, the faint scent of sage and sun baked into the fabric. I caught myself reaching for my phone more times than I'd admit, fingers hovering over his name, unsure if I should text or wait. A few days passed before I finally messaged him. Not something dramatic, just a simple, "Hey, how are you?" His reply came quickly, warm and easy, like we hadn't skipped a beat. Over the next few weeks, our conversations grew, from texts to phone calls and a plan to meet again soon. The scariest part wasn't losing him. It was coming back to a life where I had to decide if I could keep being vulnerable, if I could trust someone enough to let them in beyond postcards and late-night talks. But every time I thought about closing off again, I remembered that gnarled desert heart tree, rooted deep in unforgiving soil, still standing strong. One Sunday, we met at a quiet cafe, a low-key spot with big windows and sunlight spilling in. Seeing him there, smiling that same gentle smile, I realized how much I wanted this, to keep building something real. No grand gestures, no fairy tale endings, just two people trying to be honest and present in a world that often wasn't. We talked for hours about ordinary things and bigger hopes, and when he reached across the table to take my hand, it felt like coming home. Not because everything was perfect. There would be challenges ahead, distance to navigate, old fears to face, but because we were choosing to try together. Driving home that day, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet confidence that healing wasn't a destination, but a journey. One where touch, trust, and connection could be the guides, not just fleeting moments in a desert retreat. And in that I found a kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing.